Hi, welcome to Forward Community Church Children's Ministries. We're back again today with you for another Bible story. We have the story of Samson, the strongest man alive. This time period in Israel's history was kind of a strange time. They'd conquered the land and they were a nation, but they had no king. They had basically no central government. There was nobody ruling over them. They were kind of a loose group of tribes that worked together. They kind of had a cycle that they kept going through. They would start out like after Joshua, they were full of faith. You know, they trusted God. They were doing what he wanted them to do. God really blessed them. They drove out their enemies, gained a whole bunch of stuff, and then they started to kind of fade away from that. They didn't follow God as much, and then they started just outright worshiping other idols. And then God would bring some enemy in to oppress them, and they would really like steal all their stuff and kill them and just keep them under. And the people would start calling out to God, and finally God would send someone to deliver them. They usually called these people judges because they would come and judge Israel, and they would be a leader that would just kind of help them overthrow their enemies, and God would then again give them blessings, and they would have faith in God, and the whole cycle would repeat over and over again. During this time there lived a man whose name was Manoah, and he and his wife had no children. One day Manoah's wife is out doing her work, and suddenly an angel appears to her, and she's frightened. But the angel says, "Don't be afraid. I've come to tell you that God's going to give you a very special baby, and he's really going to bless this baby, and he's going to be a judge for Israel." Manoah prayed to God and said, "God, please come again and tell us what we should do for this special baby that you're going to give us. We want to know how to take care of him." The angel appeared to them again, and he said, "I'm going to give you a special baby, but there's some special rules that go with this baby. First rule is that he is not to get a haircut. You are to let his hair just grow as long as it will go. He is not supposed to drink any alcohol, and he's not supposed to eat a certain group of foods that they told them to." Sure enough, they had a baby boy. As this child grew up, he got stronger and stronger, and he became a man. He was extremely strong. As he was a young man, he was traveling one time from one city to another, and he was attacked by a lion. I've never been attacked by a lion, but I imagine it's a pretty scary experience, and I would probably be killed. But Samson, he was so strong. He grabbed the lion and he ripped it and killed it with his bare hands. No weapons. He just killed that lion right there. Then later, as he was traveling back by, he decided he was going to swing in and go, wonder how my lion's doing. He comes in, and inside the lion, some bees have come, and they made a nest, and they made honey inside of the lion. So he scooped some of that honey up and ate it, and it was sweet and good honey. Later he came up with a riddle, and he said, "Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet." And he challenged all his friends to solve this riddle. None of his friends, of course, could figure it out. He had just gotten married, though, and his new wife asked him what the riddle was, and he told her. And she went and told all his friends, so they solved the riddle, and they kind of won the bet. So he was really angry at this, but he was even more angry whenever he'd married a wife of the Philistines, who were a people that were oppressing the Israelites at this point. They took his wife and they gave her to someone else, to his best friend. So he was really angry. He was so angry he decided to have some revenge. He went out and he caught 300 foxes, and he tied the tails of 2 foxes together, and he put a firebrand, a torch, in between the tails, and then he let them go in the Philistines' fields of grain. And the foxes ran all around because they had fire behind them, and they lit everything on fire and burned up all their food. Now, of course, the Philistines wanted revenge. He just burned up their food, so they are going to capture him, and he lets himself be captured, and he's tied up. They tie up his hands, they tie ropes around him, and they take him away as a prisoner. And he waits until he's in the middle of a whole bunch of them, and then he just breaks off all the ropes, and he grabs a jawbone of a donkey. He uses this jawbone as a weapon, and he fights the soldiers, and he ends up killing 1,000 of the Philistine soldiers with nothing but a jawbone, and they have spears and swords, and he just beats them really bad. Now the Philistines are really angry, and they have some special troops that are just trying to capture him. So they follow him around, and finally one day they spot him going into a city. So they come up to the city, it's nighttime, and they're like, okay, we're going to catch him in the morning. He can't get away from us. He's inside the walls of the city. So they lock the gates, guard the gates. He pulls another fast one on them. In the middle of the night, he gets up, The gates are locked, and so he just grabs the gates, rips them off the hinges, puts them on his shoulder, and carries the gates off and leaves them on top of a hill a long ways away. He just completely escaped out of the city when they thought they had him. Samson didn't always make good choices, though, especially whenever he chose women. He chose a woman named Delilah, who turned out to be a Philistine spy. She was a beautiful woman, though, and he fell madly in love with her. She kept asking him, "What's the secret to your strength?" And he would tell her different things. He'd like, "Okay, if you tie me up with brand new ropes." He was tied up with brand new ropes, and he'd just rip them and fight the soldiers. Finally, she just kept bugging him and bugging him. He was like, "Okay, actually the secret to my strength is my hair. If you shave off all of my hair, I will be as weak as anyone else." She brings a man in while he's sleeping, and he shaves off all his hair. And she says, "Samson, the Philistines are here to get you." And he wakes up thinking he's just going to fight them off like always, and he's weak. And they capture him, they tie him up, and they take him as a prisoner, and they put out his eyes. So here he is now, weak and blind, no longer a threat to the Philistines. They put him to work grinding wheat, walking around and around in a circle with a grindstone. He was brought really low after all this. The Philistines made fun of him. They made fun of God. They'd finally beaten God's strong man. One day they decide to have a big feast, and they have it in the temple of their god. Their god was called Dagon, and he's a fish god. They're worshiping, and let's bring Samson out so that we can make fun of him. So they send for Samson, and they have a boy lead him in. "We beat you. You can't even see us." There were at least 3,000 men on the upper level of this temple, and there were more down below. And Samson asks the boy that's with him, he says, "Can I just lean on something so that I'm steady? I can't see where I'm at. Can you take me to the pillars that are in the center?" And the boy brought him there so he could put one hand on each side on the pillar. His hair, though, had started to grow back out. And he prayed to God, and he said, "God, give me strength one last time. Let me be able to kill my enemies this one last time, God." And God did. And Samson pushed the pillars, the support beams of that temple, and collapsed the entire thing. He was able to kill more people in that last act that killed him as well than he was in all the rest of his life up to that point. You know, God used a rather strange man in a rather strange way here to deliver his people, but he was still looking out for them. And there's a lot of other amazing stories all through this section of Judges. I really enjoy this section because it's kind of like I said, it's a weird time of history in Israel. Before the kings and after Moses, you can see how God was orchestrating everything. And if you look around us today, I think you can see that same pattern that plays out in our individual lives, our larger society. You know, we tend to go through this cycle of we need God and we cry out to him and we have faith in him and he blesses us, and then we just kind of get lazy and we get kind of confident in ourselves and we start to slide away from God, and then God ends up bringing hard times again. Before we get to the part that's our enemies are coming to capture us, maybe we can head it off and we can turn back to the faith part and we can cry out to God again and say, "God, I'm sorry. I know that it's only you that can deliver me, and would you please do that?" That's it for today. We'll see you all next time. God bless.